Here we go, Jets fans. We are back Thursday, July 20th. We've got Johnny Jets. We've got Matt O'Leary. We've got training camp upon us. We've got Aaron Rodgers in the building. We've got a lot to cover. We've got the Hall of Fame game around the corner. But before we get there, as always, reporting from Jets Universe, Johnny Jets.
Hello, Jets Universe.
And as promised, and he showed up, and we greatly appreciate that he does. He is a radio host, a podcaster, a blogger, and a content creator. All of it for our beloved New York Jets. Please welcome to the show, to NYJ Ground Crew. Maybe he'll be a Ground Crew member himself someday, Matt O'Leary.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Matt, we greatly appreciate you being here. Now, I'm going to recap real quickly. I'm going to tell kind of how you came to us. So, you know, we've basically taken the summer off from the podcast before we fire it back up again when the preseason hits and the games are played and the lights turn on Sundays. But Johnny's out there having a lot of fun on Twitter, and he's posting a lot of old clips and throwing out some of the things that he certainly feels. I love him. I encourage it. I think it's great. And one of them made their way to you, something specific that he had mentioned about Hard Knocks. We'll cover it a little bit later and when we talk more about Hard Knocks, but something specific about how he felt. Johnny, why don't you tell us a little bit, just quickly, if you don't mind, and recap for us your theory and your feelings on Hard Knocks and how the Jets got on there.
Well, very simply, I was trying to understand why Robert Saleh made some of the decisions that he made, either to do things that he shouldn't have done or not do things that he should have done as head coach of the New York Jets. That resulted in 2-8 and 0-6 to end the season. And I really didn't have any kind of thought as to what that could be until it came to my knowledge that if a team had made the playoffs the previous year, as I read it, they would not be eligible to be on Hard Knocks. As I later was clarified for me, it meant that they wouldn't be on the finalist list of be on Hard Knocks, but they could still volunteer, but they couldn't not be mandated to be on Hard Knocks. So I said, okay, well, that's consistent with the Jets' historic performance as an organization, tank the season so they could be one of the favorites to be on Hard Knocks.
And here we are, oddly enough. I mean, you know, we'll get to it. You know, your credit, hey, they're actually on Hard Knocks one way or the other, whether it was forced down their throat or whether there was something going on behind the scenes. They're on Hard Knocks. Anyway, the clip made its way on Twitter back over to Matt O'Leary. And Matt, I believe you put it up on your little peanut gallery segment, and you had a little fun and you broke down what Johnny was saying and how wild it all was. We found it awesome, appreciate it, hysterical, and we're glad you did. But, you know, moving on from that, we're here to talk about you before we talk Jets football. And man, are we going to talk Jets football? Anybody tuning in wants to hear about Jets football, of course. But I think Johnny and I, you know, as fans of yours, want to hear about you a little bit. So if you don't mind, just tell us exactly how and when you got started talking about the Jets.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been a long path to get here, really. I guess it goes back to over 10 years ago now, about 2014. So I was in college doing a college radio show for my school station, and I covered New York sports, and I loved doing it. It was, you know, so much fun doing that every semester, the radio show. And as my time in college was coming to an end, I didn't necessarily want to stop doing the show, even though I didn't really have a platform to do it on anymore. So I decided I was going to start a YouTube channel. And originally, if some of the videos are still up, if you go way back on my YouTube channel, I did videos on all different kinds of New York sports. It wasn't just the Jets specifically. But after a little bit, I noticed that the Jets videos were getting a little bit more traction and thought, all right, maybe, you know, there's something to this. So let me switch and just cover the Jets. And I've been doing that now for 4 or 5 years on YouTube. It's been a wild ride. I've done a bunch of different things in sports as well on top of just the radio show and also the YouTube channel. I've written for many platforms on digital content platforms, from Lead Sports New York, Odds Checker US, more on the sports gambling side. I covered the Islanders for a website called Eyes on Isles, and then I've got off on my own with my former partner there, and we do our own thing up the Turnpike, covering the Islanders there. But pretty much from the age where I was old enough to realize I'm not going to make it as a professional baseball player, which was my 10-year-old dream. I knew I wanted to work put myself in sports somehow, and I really like the digital media space and wanted to carve out my own little niche there.
But you're independent, right? I mean, you're out there doing it on your own, right? I mean, you create all the content yourself, or do you have anybody supporting you, or anybody behind you or above you?
No, not a, yeah. I'm totally independent now. At this point, like I said, I did in the past. I have worked for other publications and platforms, but over the last few months, I've been able to make the move. Last October is when I officially became just full independent, just me doing it. It's been a lot of fun doing it. There's been some up and downs along the way. Unfortunately, the season didn't end the way that we wanted to last year, which stunk. But it was it's been a really fun almost year at this point that I've been doing this, and can't wait for the future as well.
Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, take us through a typical day if you don't mind. I mean, so, let's say the season starts, right? I mean, September 11th hits, it's that Sunday or whatever it is, or what the week looks like. What do you seem to put a lot out there on YouTube, certainly on Instagram, and there's a lot to be done. And again, are you doing all that yourself, or are you like third party sourcing that to do some of that content, or is it all you?
Yeah, so I would say about 95% of it is me. I have one friend who helps me edit videos occasionally. He cuts clips from my longer podcast, the Just Jets show that I do every Wednesday, and he'll post that on my secondary channel where I also have the Peanut Gallery shows there. And he'll also he'll help me screen voicemails for the show if I'm having a busy week, but most of it's me. So I'll wake up in the morning, find a topic that I want to talk about, come up with my notes for it, record it, edit, upload, promote on social media. I added all my video, I script all my videos, I edit them all. I then repurpose them for YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels and TikTok, and I'm putting it out there and just trying to stay active on social media to keep my name out there and stay on top of everything that's going on. It's I usually do one or two YouTube videos a day, so it's I do that a couple of times a day. It's not your standard I work from 9 to 5. It's kind of sporadically throughout the day. I take breaks in between, but if something's going on specifically earlier in the day that I want to cover, or later on in the day that I want to cover, I have the flexibility to do that, which I really like having that flexibility. But it's a lot more that goes into it than, all right, we're just going to turn the camera on and talk for 10 minutes about the Jets. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff, working on the business side, working with brands and trying to, get sponsorships and other business opportunities as well. So it's not as simple as turn on the camera, talking to the microphone, and you're done for the day. There's a lot behind the scenes that goes into it as well.
No, that's basically what Johnny and I do, but you're actually good at this. So you you show up and you put out the good content, and it does feel like obviously that you put in the time and the effort, and even if it's just a short clip and what you're talking about. I mean, does it ever feel like a slog, or is it on autopilot at this point? Like you've kind of got your brand and know what you're doing? Are you always trying to improve on that? Or does it, and at the same time, does it feel like this grind you got to get through, or do you just love it? You're like, I'm a social media maven. I can't wait to get up and put this out there.
No, I do love it. It's a blast to wake up every single day and get to do this. And like anything, there's some days where maybe you're not feeling 100% and you'd rather do something else. But I kind of just have to take a step back and realize what it is that I get to do every single day. If I told 10-year-old me that this is what I got to do every single day in my life, I wouldn't believe it. So I love it. It doesn't really feel like work most days. There's a lot of effort that goes into it, but it's something that I'm extremely passionate about. I get excited when there's breaking news and you get that rush of, oh my God, I got to record this video and get it up right away because I want to be the first one to have my reaction out. It's I have a little bit of competitiveness in me with it, but I love it. It's so much fun to getting to talk football and talk sports with people online every day.
Look, I can riff a million questions off the top of my head, but I want to stop myself here because Johnny should lob in a question or two. Johnny, anything on your mind you want to ask Matt?
Well, I just want to commend you. There's a consistency of tone for the content that you do upload multiple times a day on a regular basis, and I think that's a key to one of the keys to your success in doing it is that your audience, sees a familiar face, familiar backdrop, and familiar presentation, which is excellent each and every time. So, that's to be commended, and I really do.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's, consistency is key. Anytime anyone ever asks, what should I do if I want to get into either podcasting or doing any sort of content? I always tell them, like, just put out as much as you can and be consistent with it, because I think sometimes people get too concerned with it being perfect right away, and it's not going to be perfect right away. Like, if I myself go back and watch things I did years ago, I hate watching that back. I don't think it's very good, that stuff, but you have to learn, and the only way you can learn is by doing. So, anytime anyone ever asks, I always say that just start. There's no excuse. If you have a phone, you have a camera, that's your microphone, and just go talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. And there's all these free platforms to upload content, whether it be YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you want to do a podcast, audio platform. So there's really no excuse today to not go out and just do it if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
So you're saying what you started doing the Jets podcast around or in 2014?
So I started I started a New York sports show on my radio station in 2014, and then I graduated in 2016, 2017, and from the fall or no, excuse me, the spring of 2018 onward, I was putting out content on YouTube. For the first 6 months to a year, it was more like New York sports based, and then from the 2019 Jets season on, it's been all Jets all the time.
It's pretty good. Now, you mentioned a competitive streak in you to get it out and do that first. When it comes to mine, like, I'm thinking about, speaking of Jets universe, like, who's out there and the names that pop out who have a following at this point. It's like Jake Asman, Boy Green, which I think two of your good friends, right? I mean, the last video you popped, like, you're going to be out there kind of putting together a little party, and you want people to show up with those guys. I think like a Green Bean or Joe Blewett. I mean, these are the names that pop out of me. Are there anybody else I'm forgetting, or how do you interact with all of them, and how are they your friends, and how do you guys all support each other in trying to build up a following?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And while I'm competitive with it, I love all those guys that I get to work with. I'm doing in Canton in Ohio for the Hall of Fame. It's myself, Jake Asman, and Boy Green. We're doing a get together, which is going to be a lot of fun. But I do the Tuesday show with Green Bean and Ryan from Jets Talk 24/7, and there's so many different creators in this Jets space. And I think we're really blessed as a fan base to have so many different outlets of people who are providing coverage. And it's not everyone's not doing the same thing, which I think is a good thing. Everyone kind of has their own spin on how they want to cover the team and what they want to talk about and do. And I think there's room for everybody. And most 99% of the interactions I've ever had with other people are positive ones. And we're all supportive of each other. We like to lift each other up. We go on everyone's shows, and vice versa. And I've never had a bad experience where it's like, oh, I don't want to help out this Jets creator because I want to go put myself in front of them. I don't really look at it that way. Do I want to have my video out first? Of course I do, but I don't want anyone else to do badly. I think there's room for everybody in this space.
Is there a number in mind when you look at your YouTube following or Instagram or any of that matters most to you? You trying to hit a bigger number? You try, which is already a sizable number, but do you need it to be times X, whatever it may be? Are you looking? Is there like a golden cup you're gonna reach and that's it, or you just keep going, or are there numbers in mind that you need to hit to feel good about this?
Yeah, I'm at 18,000 subscribers right now. I'd like to get to over 20,000 subscribers by the end of this season, which I think is a realistic goal for myself. But eventually, the 100,000 is the number that really jumps out to me. The first milestones, 1,000, then getting to that 10,000 mark was the next big one. And then to me, after that, the 100,000 is really that next step. It's gonna take a while. It's not gonna be easy by any stretch of the imagination, but that's eventually my goal. And just gonna remain consistent and put out my videos every day. And if the more people still like my content, and if I have to adjust to get there, I'll adjust. But kind of just playing it by ear and enjoying the ride so far.
I think by coming on this show, you should get another maybe 2 or 3 people who's watching. And I guess and I'm curious about this as well. you know, because you know, obviously you mentioned these are the guys that you work with and all of that, and you follow them, and I'm sure you listen to them, and it's exciting to watch your videos. Is there somebody in particular that rises above? Is there an outlet, a blog, you know, someone who does videos that you watch consistently that you're like, that guy's good, or I need to do that, and I'm interested in what they have to say.
Yeah, there's the guys that I work with in Jets Talk 24/7 and Green Beans channel. They are some of the OGs in the space. They've been around a long time, and I love watching their stuff. I try to get in as much as possible. Jake Asman with his live streams, I think what he does is really unique, and I love his perspective. And he has the radio background, so I think he's very good on air and covering things. And the Badlands podcast with Joe Caporoso and Connor Rogers. I think those two guys are really extremely knowledgeable about the team. And there's so many other ones that I try to keep, tabs on, but those are the ones that are jumping out to me right now as ones that I find myself tuning into regularly and, not getting ideas from, but I guess inspiration on different ways or approaches to covering certain things. Those are usually my go-to people.
Johnny, you brought some people into my life I wasn't even keenly aware of prior to meeting you. Why don't you tell us a little about who you follow and who you love outside of Crew Chief A.M. Pepper, of course.
Well, I've been listening to Joe Beningo since he was doing overnights at WFAN when he took over for Steve Summers. I remember one of the first overnights that he did, he asked every caller who called up who was a better running back, Barry Sanders or Emmitt Smith. And after listening to this from like 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., I called him up and I told him that, he was way better than, asking a pat question like that to every caller, that it was redundant and he had nothing to do with the topics on the table. And he dropped it.
You've been known to pop on a tiki show here and there as well, right?
Yeah, I did so well on the Tiki and Tierney show that it was disbanded almost within a matter of weeks. Yeah, that was a fun show to call into because those guys had really good chemistry, and they were they let the caller talk, and they also bounced off what the caller had to say. So yeah, I mean I've called up. With my usual stuff about how Pat Leahy's the biggest choke artist in the history of organized sport. I do that from time to time. How Woody Johnson has been involved in the football operations of the Jets since day one. I'll just throw things out, which is, at worst, a little bit different than most of the calls that day. And that just gives the host of the show something to bounce off of and talk about, whether they agree with it or disagree with it. They're talking about it. And I think that's the objective.
All right, one more question from Matt, and then we are absolutely delving into Jets football because there's a lot to cover. There's so much to talk about, and it's a lot of fun, as we know, and that's why people are listening, certainly. But, Matt, the end game, do you have one in mind, right? I mean, obviously, you mentioned, hey, I'm going to get to these subscribers, and that'll feel good, and then, obviously, you're talking about sponsorships, and obviously, that's kicking you up the food chain, and that's just makes a lot of sense. But for you personally, I mean, what is it that you strive to be or hope to see yourself 5 years, 10 years down the road? Is it still in Jets universe, or is it even something bigger?
No, I would say definitely still in this Jets universe. I want to do this for as long as, as there's a demand for it. And right now, I think in the digital age, there's going to always be a demand for content. And who knows, maybe the platforms change a little bit and the formatting changes. But yeah, my goal is to just continue to put out Jets content. I loved, as I mentioned earlier, I loved getting to do it every single day. It's something that I'm extremely, extremely passionate about. Mm-hmm. And just really about growing the audience and getting more, eyeballs in front of me. But I want to keep, pounding along, doing that same stuff, but just in front of more people.
All right, I lied. One more question before we delve into the Jets. What got you into the Jets specifically? Can you remember the first memory or the game or the player? Or what was it that was like, this team forever?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of my earliest Jets memories, I was working with my dad on a Sunday morning, and we were talking about there was a football Sunday, and I was more of a casual fan. I didn't really get what was going on yet at that point. I was young. I was 7 or 8 years old. And we was talking about, when you go to a game, people tailgate and they make all this kind of food. They cook out on their grills, and it's like a big party before going into the game. And I thought that was like, oh my God, like that's the coolest thing in the world. And he's like, you know what? The Jets are playing the Dolphins later today. Why don't we, we'll go home after, we'll go home early. We'll make some like tailgate food. We have like chips and dip and wings and all kinds of stuff like that. And we'll watch the game. And we did. And I'll never forget it. It was 2003. Ricky Williams ran wild on the Jets and the Jets lost, but I was hooked. I loved it. And then that was our tradition every Sunday. I always watch the game with my dad and with my family. We always have, a bunch of different food, drinks. And I'm not the kind of person, I don't like to go out to a bar and watch a game. I feel like I miss too much. I love being in my seat in the house and getting to watch with my family. It's something we've been doing for 20 years. And I can't really, imagine that changing anytime soon. Yeah, I think, that's a tradition that we're going to keep going for a long time.
Side note, when I ask that question and the answer is about family or specifically fathers, I might not show it on the outside, but I am crying a little bit on the inside. I think that's awesome. That's wonderful. So thank you for sharing. Let's jump into it. Let's talk Jets. Training camp opened to a lot of fanfare. I think there's a lot of eyes around the league, a lot of fans who aren't otherwise aware or haven't been aware of the Jets in a decade who are all of a sudden watching all of them, maybe just as excited or close to excited as a lot of Jets fans. What do we think, Johnny?
I mean, the Jets are the Super Bowl champions of the offseason, every offseason. This year is just a little bit more high profile, probably the most high profile since Brett Favre came to the Jets. But certainly when you have a Hall of Fame Super Bowl champion quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, it's hard to dispute that there's a reason to watch Jets football this year.
Yeah, Matt, what do you think? I mean, how hyped are you? 1 to, let's call it 64.
I'm pretty amped up, man, for this season. It's got to be, one of the most anticipated Jets seasons, maybe ever, at least of my fandom. You go back to 2010 after they went to the championship game in 2009. That was a pretty hyped season, but getting a quarterback who's eventually going to be a Hall of Famer, and now you have Hard Knocks. They're a team that's going to be in the prime time, with more primetime games this year than seemingly forever for at least 10 plus years. But they're going to get a lot of attention, which I think is a good thing. I think this team is, they had a lot of good young players trending in the right direction last year. Unfortunately, things ended really poorly for the team, but I think with improved quarterback play, there's no reason to think that they can't be a playoff team and make some noise in the playoffs. And for good reason, fans are excited about that because it's been 12 years since the last time they made the playoffs. So I'm amped up. I can't wait for this season. And it's easy to understand why Jet fans are excited for it.
Yeah, I think the key word here is relevance. I mean, I harken back obviously to Sexy Rex Ryan when he came to town, and he made the team relevant instantly. Love the guy, I really did. And essentially what the spin he just put on our squad, and all of a sudden, he's bringing in free agents left and right, especially on the defense, and even Davian Woody along the line, and Faneca and those guys. And it was awesome. I mean, like instant gratification, right? I mean, Sanchez came to town and bang, back-to-back AFC Championship games, and that was cool. This time around, though, the relevance feels different. It feels better, because it's JD and Saleh building this together, what it feels like now over the third year, and all of a sudden, here comes the relevance. But have they built a better foundation, right? Rex came in, just slapped on amazing coats of paint, put in new windows, whatever it may be, and it's like, wow, that's a beautiful new house. But was it built to last? And unfortunately, we know the answer. Could this one be built to last a bit better, even though Rodgers may only be around 1, 2, possibly 3 years? I hope it's 3. We probably all do, especially if he's doing it at a high level. But yeah, I mean, it's the relevance more than anything. I mean, Johnny, do you feel like we're relevant again? Do you think that's a good thing?
Well, I mean, the Jets are certainly relevant. The Jets are certainly better than they were last year. And, things would have to go horribly wrong for the Jets not to make the playoffs this year. They went so horribly wrong last year, and they still only by the least of margin missed the playoffs. So you would think that simply by adding Aaron Rodgers in a league where 7 teams make the playoffs in each conference, that the Jets are going to make the playoffs. I think the question becomes, are they capable of winning the division and guaranteeing a home playoff game? The question is, I don't know. And if they have to play as a wild card team on the road, are they capable of winning that game? And the question remains, I don't know. So will the Jets make the playoffs this year? If everybody stays healthy, then almost certainly they will. Are they going to win any playoff games? Well, that's what remains to be seen. If they win some playoff games, well, then the hype is justified.
Matt, does it matter to you if they win any playoff games if they at least get there?
Yeah, that's I think it's a really nuanced conversation to have about the success of this season. A lot of people are stamping that it has to be a Super Bowl. If it's not a Super Bowl, it's a failure. And for me, I don't think that's fair for this team, but also at the same time, like if they go 9-8 or the 7th seed and get bounced in the wild card game, like I don't think that's enough either. I think you need to win, 11 or 12 games in the regular season, win a playoff game or two, and anything after that is great. Obviously, my hope is for them to win the Super Bowl. That should be the goal, and I would be disappointed if they don't, but after 12 years of missing the playoffs, if they win, 12 games and unfortunately get bounced by a Kansas City in the AFC Championship game, that to me, I can't sit here after watching 10 years plus of just absolute garbage and say that was a disaster season. I can't personally do it, but I think they have to, at least win a playoff game as well.
Just the fact that their uniforms are on the field on Sundays, and I don't mean to sound too out there about this, but that honestly makes me happy enough. Yeah, I want to see them in the playoffs. Yes, of course, I want to see them in the Super Bowl, but it's like, again, that notion of relevance. They're relevant. They're not the laughing stock of the league. They're not even close. You look at their numbers to compete to even go to the Super Bowl, and they're obviously in the top 6, 7, or 8 teams right next to the Cowboys. And that's exciting. That's exciting enough. I mean, obviously, a lot of it and most of it's going to depend on the health of Aaron Rodgers. But it's just insane what we're looking forward to. It's insane that he's here. I think, anybody want to jump in on this? Like, just a couple months removed of it actually happening. I mean, think about what had to be manifested to get Aaron Rodgers onto the Jets, right? Like, it wasn't like a guy, in free agency who's coming here. And it wasn't some, totally maligned quarterback in some horrid situation or a Deshaun Watson situation where it would, just terrible. I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole about how he could have otherwise come here, or somebody else who's just in a bad situation. I mean, this is still Aaron Rodgers, who could have easily just been like, yeah, let me finish out my career in Green Bay, and who's going to be unhappy about that, and who's going to have a bounce back year after 2 MVP seasons. I don't think there's enough that is spoken about the fact that this guy is over 35 years old at this point and did it over 35 years old. A lot of the drop off happens around 32, 33, 34. And here he is, one of the anomalies of the world, let alone the sport, who's back-to-back MVP seasons. Yeah, last year QBR wasn't as good. The numbers obviously weren't as good. Hurt thumb. Conversations go on forever. But let's just think about this for a second. The manifestation of him getting onto our team is still somewhat crazy to me. I mean, surreal what happened on the McAfee show, but just insane that we were like, let's go get Aaron Rodgers, and then we did. Matt?
Yeah, I still have to find myself, I pinch myself almost every day. I saw the pictures of him today, at training camp, and it's like, it still doesn't really sink in at times, but yeah, he chose the Jets. Like, he wanted to be here. It wasn't like, Green Bay traded him here because that was it.
He didn't just choose the Jets, but he also eschewed the Patriots, and that just felt equally as good. I don't know about you, Johnny.
Oh, for sure. 100%. That only adds to it. I don't know. He saw the coaching staff and saw what Joe Douglas was building here and saw the young talent and said, that's where I want to go. I want to try to win a championship there, which just, again, is almost hard to believe, as you were saying, but it's the reality that we're living in right now.
It's amazing. Johnny, let me ask you this. Did I use the word eschew right? And secondly, your thoughts on Rodgers actually being here. Although your screen looks frozen, I hope we can hear you. Let's see. Nope, he's frozen. He's going to have to come back.
You're an expert grammarian. So, yeah. You're an expert grammarian, True Chief. You don't need to ask if you're using the language correctly. All Jets fans speak well. I mean, it's kind of there's kind of this schizophrenic view of Aaron Rodgers prior to him coming here, and since he's been here. Before it was, well, he can only go to the Jets. He has no other suitors. He's got this. The Green Bay Packers don't want to pay him. They can't pay him. So we can't give Green Bay the 5 first-round draft picks that they want, saying that he's a Hall of Fame quarterback and he will instantly turn any team into a contender, certainly the Jets. And now, since he's been here, he's everything that Green Bay said he was when they were negotiating with the Jets, and the Jets were downplaying. I think that the season that it feels the most reminiscent of is 1993. Obviously, in 1992, the Jets went 4-12, and then in the offseason, They traded for running back Johnny Johnson. They traded for quarterback Boomer Esiason. I believe they got Nick Lowry as a free agent. They signed Leonard Marshall. They signed Ronnie Lott. And there was all this expectation that, this is it. We have a quarterback who's in the Super Bowl. We've got the pieces. Last year there were injuries. That'd be 92, Jeff Lyman specifically. And, and of course, they didn't make the playoffs. So, that's kind of how it feels like going in with all of hype. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers on paper and on the football field over his career is a better football player than Boomer Esiason. The Jets right now have players at certain positions that are as good as anybody at their positions. I think the real question becomes two things, I guess. Is Aaron Rodgers going to stay healthy? He traded last year when his son's injured. He's not as good as when he's not injured. That's not rocket science. That's that's just pretty clear by his production list. And the second thing would be head coach. Robert Saleh, the quarterback, or phrase would be the quarterback room to hide behind. He won't have that. They're so much more high profile than they've been in a very long time. That's true, and that's that's legitimate. Just there's going to be more people watching Jets football, and if he's playing the Chiefs or playing the Bills or whomever, and there's hundreds of millions of people watching, and the Jets lose on a Robert Saleh mistake at the end of the game, then he's going to get noticed. If they do make the playoffs and they play in the wild card, let's say against the Tennessee Titans, and they get a coach, they're gonna bear the brunt of the blame for that. But it's also an opportunity for Robert Saleh to demonstrate that he is better than his record substantiates. I will point out that Adam Gase, in the end of his first year, he went 6-3 to finish his first season as Jets head coach. Robert Saleh, he started off at 6-3, and then he went 7-4. So that's the best run that Robert Saleh had ever gotten. Adam Gase basically matched it over the same number of games. So is Robert Saleh closer to Adam Gase, or is he closer to Bill Belichick? We're going to find out this year.
All right. Couple things out of that. One, Johnny, you got to check your connection because I think we're getting a lot of that lost in the sauce, unfortunately. Number two, I like the fact that potentially hundreds of millions of people are going to be watching the Jets play KC. And Matt, what do you think of all of that after listening to that? And again, I still want to hear your thoughts a little bit more on Rodgers.
Yeah, on Rodgers, I think that it's people are going to continue to look at the age and think, can he still do this at 39 years old? And last year for sure was a down year by his standards, and he did play a majority of it with a broken thumb, so I think you have to take that into account. But just seeing in general how rejuvenated he looks and how excited he looks to be here is giving me optimism towards what could be an exciting season. And it's a prove-it year for a lot of guys. As Johnny was saying, with Robert Saleh, we're going to find out, just how good of a head coach he is with the talent that's on this team. And they're young. Last year, they didn't know how to win yet, and they had quarterback issues and offensive line problems down the stretch. And to me, that was a huge factor why they, began to lose games and, missing two of their better players in Breece Hall and AVT on the offensive line. Defense was still really good. The defense was still very good. So now you would hope. Again, the key word is hope. You don't know until it happens, but with improved quarterback play and someone like Aaron Rodgers, they would be able to close out some of those games that they weren't able to during that losing streak. But it's going to be, it's make or break for a lot of these guys. And I think it's time to start winning games. There's no excuses. You can't be going 7-10 or 8-9 and saying, well, we took a marginal step. We're a little bit better than what we were last year. That's not acceptable. You got to be a playoff team this year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But I mean, speaking of rejuvenation, it seems like it's so much more than that with Rodgers in the building. I mean, when Wilson first got here and we were all excited and who knew what the kid can do, and unfortunately we found out exactly what that was. But, before he was here and then he's here and then he's the one going out to Islanders game and he's chugging beers, with his backup offensive lineman in Feeney out there and whatever it may be. I mean, it's very different feeling when the young babyface kid is doing it and you don't know what you're getting. And then the stud comes into town and he's at Taylor Swift concerts and he's going to the Met or he's doing all these kind of things and he's out on the town and he's at Knicks games. This isn't rejuvenation. This is over the top love affair that none of us have really seen before. Favre didn't do it when he came here. I mean, this guy walked into town after all of this, after everybody speculating if it was going to happen, not going to happen, then it did happen, and he's going to come into the building and he's going to burn down the town, burn down the locker room and all this. And you wanted to, everybody just wanted to put the pejorative spin on this. I mean, the dude showed up day one in the Jets gear, and it was just like lights on, right? Like more Broadway than Broadway Joe. Showed up at every OTAs. He got hurt for a couple minutes. Everybody wanted to put the negative spin on that, and it just kept going. And he's back on the field and he's talking to everybody. And even today's article, right? Somebody wrote today specifically, like just this insanely different feel. Like he is, essentially Saleh said it. He's like a coach on the field who's still playing now, and he has taken a step back. He's not triggered by the same things. He's embracing the media. He's embracing the team, embracing the limelight, and just embracing the notion that he's still playing football and playing football for the New York Jets. And that cannot get thrown aside too easily. I mean, I think we all, as fans, have to take a moment and pause. Not only is it just surreal, but it's incredible. It should be a great feeling. I mean, Johnny, you've been a fan of this team for decades upon decades, and there is that, in the bloodline feeling of like the losing. Yeah, we hope that he stays healthy. Yeah, we hope that he wins. Yeah, there's all these things against it, but like, I just think on a high level, real quick, if you don't mind, just like truthfully, how do you feel that this guy is about to be under center September 11th?
I'm excited. I mean, to quote, a former president of the United States, let me make one thing perfectly clear. No one will be happier than I will be if the Jets win the Super Bowl again. There's no conflict there. I'm not rooting for them to not win. But the fact of the matter is that, and the fact that the Jets have a quarterback with the talent of Aaron Rodgers, that's exciting. That's great. Would I wish that they had, in my view, a coach who's closer to Bruce Arians than Todd Bowles? Would I be more confident if that were the circumstances that would allow Aaron Rodgers, to be the MVP potentially this year? I would be, but again, if Robert Saleh is the coach that takes the Jets to a Super Bowl championship, then no one will be happier than I am. Aaron Rodgers is a great quarterback. He's 39 years old. He had a broken thumb last year. Anybody can get hurt. What happens if he does? Well, that would probably ruin everything. If he stays healthy and he's one of the best players in football, it's going to be a great year.
Yeah. Matt, just on the tailwind of that, because Johnny loves to bang the solid drum here. I like to call him Bobby. We're on that personal first name basis. But your thoughts on him? I mean, we like to really get the temperature of everybody coming on this show. Like, how do you feel about him now, so many years in, and his capability of leading this team and leading them to a winning record and then deep into the playoffs?
Yeah, I think it's still a question mark for me. I don't think he's proven that he's a good coach, or I don't think he's proven that he's a bad coach yet. I think there's been things that are concerning. For instance, I think some of his game management could be a little bit of a problem, but for the positive side, I think he interacts really well with the players. I think he's extremely well respected, and I think he has to be given a ton of credit for how quickly that defense turned around from 2021 into 2022. I think part of it had to do with the quarterback that he was given, and number two, just the amount of injuries that they suffered last year. For why they weren't able to, again, close out the season and get themselves into a playoff spot after a 7-4 start. I think he gets a brunt of the blame over, Joe Douglas for last year, and I think some of it's justified. I think that both guys played a factor in why things fell off down the stretch for this team, but it's a big year for him. They have expectations, and the roster's as good as it's, been in years. There's really no excuse for this team. As we said, they have to be a playoff team. They should be winning double-digit games this year. And they're going to be in a lot of high-pressured situations. So he's going to be able to show us, this season if he can handle that. And, hopefully for our case, he can.
Yeah, we will find out, and again, to your point, the game management, it was interesting. I mean, the first half of the year, it was all there and it was on full display, even, crawling out of the dumpster that they were in that Browns game, and won an absolute miracle and then had a nice little run from there, and he made all the right decisions and he looked good in the last 2 minutes of the first half, each of those games. But wow, the second half of the year, it was just one thing after the next that left your head scratching. And unfortunately, to your point, Johnny, brought us back to the Bowles days. Great defensive coordinator hell of a guy, but like it left your head scratching, or left yourself scratching your head, wondering some of the decisions that he made or why he would even talk about that math wasn't important, because it's just as important as anything else in this game. Hard Knocks, we're on it. It's happening. August 8th is the first episode. Okay. And interestingly enough, speaking of Bobby Saleh, he wore the shirt. I don't know, was it today or yesterday? Right? The I Love HK shirt, which was obviously very funny. But I thought, he said something that was interesting. I mean, more than just wearing the shirt, he said, hey, we're used to it on One Jets Drive, and we've been given assurances this is going to be fine. Now, to me, I'm not buying it. One Jets Drive is high gloss propaganda. Let's just call it like it is. Okay. Hard Knocks is drama. They're looking for it, right? They're actually, that's what makes somebody tuning in who's actually not, One Jets Drive is being watched by those who crave jets, and like slow motion walks down hallway that are really well lit. Hard Knocks is like, this is it, right? Like, we're bringing it to HBO. Everyone around the league is watching this. Fans, half fans, just TV fans are supposed to fall in love with these guys, and characters are drawn and all of this, and drama has to be manifested because it's TV, and TV is drama. I don't care if it's reality or not reality, whatever it is. That's how it is in Hollywood. So, I mean, are we concerned about Hard Knocks coming in, or are we excited about this sticking with the relevance chain and it keeps making us relevant?
Yeah, for me, I'm excited about Hard Knocks. I think as you mentioned, the One Jets Drive, for as good as it is, it's a Jets product, so they're gonna spin everything into a positive story, where Hard Knocks isn't obligated to do that. So I'm very curious to see behind the scenes on some things and some of the interactions with the players during practices and the coaches during the week, and I think that'll give us a nice behind the scenes look at this football team. And to me, the biggest difference is they don't owe the Jets anything. They don't necessarily have to, positive spin everything. If something happens and, it's maybe something that they wouldn't put out on One Jets Drive, it's coming out on Hard Knocks. So, I'm really looking forward to getting that behind the scene look. And I don't think it's going to be much of a distraction for this team. I think they'll be able to handle it. They're used to cameras being around. And while they made it clear that they didn't necessarily want to be on the show, I think it'll end up being okay.
Well, for Johnny, and I'm gonna jump this over to you, because you should get your chance to talk as much about Hard Knocks as anybody. Again, you're the one who called it a long time ago that it was going to happen, and you got your reasons why, and maybe we can rehash those a little bit, because they are kind of awesome. But more than anything, again, like drama, right? Like one thing I want to give Saleh and JD credit for more than anything is quashing the drama. That's what I love about these two guys more than anything. I mean, the regimes previous to them could not handle that. They let it seep into the building. They let it permeate the walls. They let it be the distraction, unfortunately, that takes down franchises that so many of the other good franchises don't let in. And now these guys have seemingly quashed it. I mean, even when things really reared their head, like I can think about going into training camp last year, the beat writers were just like Mims and Becton. Like, these were the big storylines because there was nothing else to sink their teeth into. And then, Wilson got hurt and they were like all excited about it because it was great. Now here comes the drama. And then everything throughout the season, the flip-flopping of the quarterbacks, Elijah Moore, I mean, a million things. But at the same time, it just felt like, the powers that be, the brass of the Jets, held it in check the best possible way where previous regimes never could. The season went along. Now, again, I don't think it was those things that just ended up killing us and why we lost. It was decisions by the head coach. It was the fact that so many injuries piled up, and the fact that you had to put Chris Streveler in games at certain points. I mean, it is what it is to a degree, and especially when you lose your running back, who was the literal runaway for Rookie of the Year until then. Just a great job of quelling this drama. But here we are now having the show about drama. I certainly don't think it'll be a distraction, but Johnny, take it away. Tell us your thoughts ultimately around the horn, all about Hard Knocks. And here we are. The first episode's coming in just a few weeks.
I mean, it's objectively true that the Jets are on Hard Knocks this year. Why that is and why that isn't, can be debated until the end of time. Whether it's because the Jets tanked the season last year because they thought they needed to in order to be on Hard Knocks this year. Well, that's certainly consistent with Robert Saleh at the Senior Bowl in January of 2022, saying that, it would be year 3 of his head coaching campaign with the Jets, that the Jets would make the playoffs. It would not be in year 2. It would be consistent with him not benching Mike White in the second halves of either of the Patriots games, with his time management at the end of the Lions game, and on and on and on. If you want to hear more broken down of my assessment of Robert Saleh at the end of the season, you can watch Just Jets peanut gallery starring Matt O'Leary, very cogent and well thought out and well presented. But yeah, I mean, Robert Saleh is also the coach last year who said, I'm taking receipts. He said, we're going to see the Bills again. He said, it's not about the playoffs or a stretch. It's not about the playoffs. You know, I think that if he has grown as a coach, that either he's going to be instructed not to say things like that when the team loses, or he's just going to let Aaron Rodgers do the talking for him.
Well, I will say this in support of you, Johnny, and obviously your thought about, you know, this notion that Woody Johnson behind the scenes or whoever it may be is actually pulling the strings to make sure we're on Hard Knocks, even though we're saying that we don't want to be. You know, it's hard to ignore some of the things that happen in the NFL. I mean, just from what happened today, and we were talking about it right before the start of the show, right? The Commanders, the rubber stamp, $6.05 billion in sale. And not too long after, Dan Snyder's fined $60 million, right? I mean, that's a 1-2 punch that happened after the fact, after he's got billions in his pocket, right? It's hard not to think strings don't get pulled behind the scenes in certain reactions. I mean, you go all the way back to Al Davis and, you know, him wanting John Elway and not getting it, and the commissioner at the time saying, like, you'll never get John Elway in the building. I mean, these things happen in the NFL, whether we want to believe it or not. The Jets haven't had a roughing the passer call, you know, for them in over, I think it's over 2 years at this point. I mean, there's little things that just add up. I'm not saying all of it is some that leads to some big funnel or the notion that, hey, we're really on Hard Knocks because of that. It could just be a number of different things, a confluence of events, all of that. So, you know, I'm not this or that, but, you know, Johnny, I think ultimately what you said wasn't really that off base. And here we are, and we are on Hard Knocks. So there's a few things that are left in the imagination. Matt?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I could go that far. I do appreciate a good conspiracy theory, which is why I did the video. I thought it was great. I loved the video and reaction. I got a kick out of it. I'm glad you guys liked my reaction to it. But it's definitely interesting with how they ended up on Hard Knocks. Now, granted, they were because they missed the playoffs, they're one of 4 teams eligible. But I think that they're the most interesting of the 4 eligible teams. Like Washington, they're going through a sell right now. They don't have really much hope for this season. I don't think they're much of a national interest. The Saints, kind of boring team. They have a new quarterback in Derek Carr. I guess you could spin that, but they're not really a team that has super high expectations. Maybe you could have spun the Bears on there with Justin Fields as an ascending player. They had a couple trades in the draft moving back. But the Jets landing Aaron Rodgers and, you know, having all this hype was, to me, the obvious choice for the show. I think it has a lot more to do with the offseason that they had with landing Aaron Rodgers and, you know, adding some talent on the offensive side of the ball with Hardman and Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb and, you know, everyone else that they added in free agency, and just having the offensive and defensive rookie of the year. So I don't really think personally it has much to do with how last season ended, but you know, they're here now and they're going to be on a national stage in front of a lot of eyeballs.
No doubt. But who was it? Who really was it? Who behind the scenes was pushing for Aaron Rodgers more than anybody as the stories come out? Because it really wasn't JD. It really wasn't Saleh. It was definitely Woody Johnson. I mean, it was all him making it happen. And to his credit, manifesting it, right? Like we talked about, he was the one who knew, I'm going after Rodgers in the offseason. I'm flying that plane out to California to meet with him. I mean, it's a lot of things that add up. I mean, again, it's not all just theory or whatever it is, but like it's not too far stretched to believe that we are on Hard Knocks because it is something that Woody Johnson may have otherwise had in his mind a year ago for whatever reason. And again, not to say that Hard Knocks is anything but a show on HBO and it won't be this or that for the team. It's just a lot of things that certainly add up. And you wonder about some of the decisions in his ownership tenure that Woody Johnson has made. I certainly wonder about it. I'm just throwing it out there because I like people to think back and maybe look up some of the things he's done as owner. And it was, you know, I certainly felt a lot better when he was across the pond. I actually want to ask that question. I liked when Chris was running the team. Woody, Johnny, what do you think of that?
I can't agree with that ever. Christopher Johnson his epitaph will be these uniforms are badass. He's the main reason Adam Gase was hired. I do not prefer Christopher Johnson over Woody Johnson or even Christopher Cross.
Thank you for keeping me in check. Matt, are you glad Woody's back?
Reluctantly, yeah. I wouldn't classify myself as the biggest Woody Johnson fan, but I think Chris's short tenure as the man in charge was pretty disastrous with the Gase hiring, the uniforms, and there's just it wasn't good. So I am thankful that Woody's back, I guess.
And look, to me, there was a few things I think he did front office wise that were some smart decisions, and some of the things in the direction of the team. But we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. I appreciate it, and I appreciate what everybody's saying on that. Um, you know, you mentioned the Saints actually as not being like this particularly interesting team. I agree with you. Just want to say that. Let's talk about Mekhi Becton for a second. Let's talk about Mekhi Becton because he's probably the biggest story other than Rodgers in camp. Okay, and I feel like this kid, I still call him a kid, is getting a lot of flack, and I don't like it personally. I think we should ease off, and I've got my reasons why, but I want to hear your reasons why if you think we should be consistently giving him all this flack. Some of the things that he said, obviously, on social media, I am left tackle, what he came out and said about the Jets organization and how they handled him and his injury and putting him out there and how he felt, his fluctuations in weight and all of that, and working with the strength and conditioning staff and whatnot. And this notion, always the notion of be a team player. Hey, guy, you got to be a team player. You're wearing that jersey. You're getting well. I don't know. There's a few things I think about. Well, really, one big thing, and we'll get to it in a minute, that obviously dominates the conversation more than others. But, how are we feeling about him? Are we happy he's back? Do we think he's going to make it through the season? Does he get traded before it even begins?
I'm hoping that he's back and healthy for the season. I think the Jets offensive line would be at their best with him healthy and out there. He has a sky high ceiling with his, rare size and ability. And we saw that from him as a rookie in 2020. I thought he had a really good rookie season. Unfortunately for him, the injuries have been the biggest story over the last 2 years. And the weight was obviously something that bothered the Jets. I don't think either side's been perfect with how they handled things. I think the Jets put an unfair timetable on his first injury from the 2021 season, where it said it's only going to be a few weeks, and then he was out for the rest of the season. I think they were a little too optimistic with that timeline. But I also don't necessarily love Becton going to Newsday and doing, a kind of a tell-all about, how he didn't want to play right tackle, and he felt like that's the reason why he got hurt. And I wish some of those things were able to be kept behind closed doors. But at this point, I think that I'm certainly rooting for him to win a starting job and remain healthy. I think if he does, he has an incredibly high ceiling. But for him, it's always going to be the injury if he's going to be able to avoid that. So I think that's really what it comes down to. That's what I'm really looking for, because if he can stay on the field, I think he's going to be a good player.
Johnny, last year you said that. Hold on a second. I got to say something before you answer. You said last year that Mekhi Becton would never put on a Jets uniform. He would never grace the field again. Do you still feel that way on opening day? Is he going to be on this team? Are you excited that he's here? I had to preface it with that.
Okay, duly noted. You can watch the tape for that. Yeah, no, I've said repeatedly this season that if Mekhi Becton is not comeback player of the year, the Jets are not making the playoffs. The number one thing to have a successful Aaron Rodgers is for Aaron Rodgers to have time to sit in the pocket and to complete his passes. He's not a scrambler by any stretch of the imagination. And yes, Mekhi Becton's ceiling is as high as any player on the Jets offensive line. And in fact, the Jets' mismanagement of his injuries goes back even earlier than 2021 to his rookie campaign of 2020 when he injured his arm. And Mekhi Becton, the rookie, demanded that he wanted to play that week. And Adam Gase, hired by Christopher Johnson, put him in the game. Mekhi Becton got re-injured in that game and then went back in that game again. And that really was the downfall of the remainder of Mekhi Becton's rookie season, and perhaps had some impact on the subsequent injuries that he's had. Now, Mekhi Becton, that was a feast or famine a pick by Joe Douglas. He could have taken Tristan Wirfs. He didn't, because the ceiling on Mekhi Becton is, all world. But when you have someone who, I believe he's 6'7", a year ago or a year and a half ago, he was 400 pounds. Boomer Esiason said he was eating himself out of football, that being Mekhi Becton. A major key, I think, to the Jets being successful this year is not only Mekhi Becton playing and starting, but playing at a Pro Bowl level.
Hashtag fire Gase. All right, so top 10, or I want to say this, 10 right tackles are making more than $10 million a year. or 10 million or more. 17 left tackles make more than $10 million a year. So this is obviously, and I think for him and a lot of the players, it comes down to this. And this is where I don't necessarily think he's wrong in his mindset or kind of how he's going about things. He is ultimately showing up. He did shave off 60 pounds. He's still putting on the Jet paraphernalia. He is ultimately here. He did start on the second string today without any complaints, ultimately, and doing what he's doing. And there's something to be said about that. You know, I mean, he was a first-round pick, right? And as we know, only first-round picks have guaranteed money on their entire contracts. That just means that they're definitely elevated against everybody else rounds below them. And there's something to be said if you're a first-round pick. And everybody around the league feels that way. A lot of the GMs do, especially when they're making these trades or they're trying to bring about and revive guys' careers. All of this, right? I mean, we saw Mims, who was a second-round pick, get traded for a bag of peanuts in 2025. So, you know, you're just looking at somebody like this. And to me, he's doing what's necessary at least to get back on the field. And I want to give him the credit. You know, as far as keeping Rodgers upright, I don't know. It remains to be seen. You know, grading him out as a pass protector would be one thing, but man, in the road game, right, the running game, it should be an absolute pancake fest on the right side of the field with him and AVT if it's done right. And that's going to mean a lot. I absolutely want to see him out on that field. To me, it's not even a question Dwayne Brown is the left tackle. I mean, he's earned it throughout his career, number one. Number two, I don't think it was like 4 months or four games. I think it's 4 total snaps in his career that he's ever played anything outside of left tackle. He's not playing anything outside of left tackle if he's healthy and he's the one who's doing it. That's our starting left tackle. Let's just call it like it is, okay? So whether it's Mitchell or forgive me, it's Billy Turner, right? Is our other? He came over from Green Bay. Potentially be the right tackle, but for the all intents and purposes, like you said, Johnny, his ceiling is there. He's more than likely going to the right tackle. I would like to see him on the team. I don't want to see him traded. I'd love to see him slot in that position. Matt, are you excited at all that he'd be there?
Yeah, I for sure am. I think it's, a really good opportunity for himself because he still has a lot to prove. Like, obviously, coming back, from injury, he still have a lot to prove. And, he's on the last year of his deal. His 5th-year option wasn't picked up. So, for him specifically, he has to prove it, whether it's with the Jets or somebody else. He's playing for his NFL life this year. So I think a motivated Mekhi Becton's always a good thing.
Wasn't that long ago that everybody was concerned Quinnen might be a bust, and here he is on he's a top 3 DT in the league. Not to say Mekhi gets back there, but his 5th-year option could come up. He can absolutely be a tremendous force and a comeback player. But yeah, he's got to be on the field for 17 games throughout it. Johnny, let's hear about your thoughts on the safeties, because Matt, you brought it up. Obviously, we had a phenomenal defense last year, and they were certainly the weak spot along top to bottom, if you want to go the front line and in the middle of the field, and then certainly in the back. I mean, we know how phenomenal our cornerbacks are, especially DJ Reed. Yes, Sauce, but man, DJ Reed was incredible last year. Even if he plays at 7/10 of what he was last year, he's still going to be very good. So really, the question mark is safeties. Let's go through them. Adrian Amos filling in for the now injured Chuck Clark, Jordan Whitehead, Tony Adams. Those are essentially your 3 starters. Ashton Davis, they often forgot about Ashton Davis, who has one or two snaps a game and often makes great use of those snaps. Marquise Waters and Trey Dean. That's our depth chart there. Are we concerned?
A little bit. I think that's probably one of the weaker positional groups on this Jets team. Now, if you had to pick a spot, you'd be weaker at unfortunately in today's NFL with a salary cap and everything, it's very hard to be excellent at every single position. Safety and linebacker are ones where you could probably get by with that not being your strength. This team and this defense is built off that defensive line and those corners being able to cover as well as they do. Safety for me, I was looking forward to watching Chuck Clark this year. I thought he was a little underrated in Baltimore, but at least Adrian Amos, even at this point in his career, should still be an upgrade over LaMarcus Joyner, what he was last year for the Jets. So that's a plus, and hopefully Jordan Whitehead bounces back because I thought he was disappointing in his first year with the Jets.
Oh, he was so disappointing. And LaMarcus Joyner, I mean, even before he tore his back a few years ago, wasn't so great on the Raiders. Obviously, we all hoped he'd revive something on the Jets, but to expect him to come back from an injury like that, play at a position, it was all very strange. So I agree with you, Johnny. What do you think? I mean, are we concerned that the safety position is going to be the downfall of this defense and take us out of the top 5?
Well, I think it's addition by subtraction with the removal of Will Parks. I think that he was a tremendous liability last year. You mentioned Chuck Clark. you talk about conspiracy theories. The final day of OTAs was June 9th. CJ Uzama had a strained quad, I believe, and it was written up at the time. It was written up that night. It was written up the next day. Written about. And Chuck Clark allegedly tore his ACL on the last play of the last OTAs, and there was a media blackout of completely until June 13th, until after the Jets signed Adrian Amos. Now, one would think, like, if the reason for that was the Jets didn't want to talk about it, and certainly Robert Saleh in his 12-minute press conference after the final OTA on June 9th said nothing about it, is that because they wanted to get Adrian Amos signed? Well, that would be fine. But since that, it's been over a month. There's still no details on what happened with Chuck Clark. What was the play? Who was the quarterback? Who was the receiver? If it was a running play? Who was running the ball? It was just some sort of non-play exercise. What happened? I don't. Mekhi Becton, when he got injured, the cameras were rolling during training camp. Something went up with Chuck Clark, I believe, in one of my current conspiracy theories. I don't know what it is, but it seems quite obvious there. What I would want to throw out to Matt, since safety, you mentioned safeties and linebackers. There's this alternate reality where the Jets in 2022, they don't trade up for Jermaine Johnson. They trade up for Tyler Linderbaum, who was picked one pick ahead of Jermaine Johnson by the Baltimore Ravens. And then this year, when it comes to the second round, instead of taking Tippmann, they take Brian Branch. So if this current Jets team had Tyler Linderbaum and Brian Branch instead of Jermaine Johnson and Joe Tippmann, which you think would be a stronger team?
I think the one you just laid out would be stronger. I don't think the Jets would have taken Brian Branch. I don't think Joe Douglas and this staff values the safety position that much to use a first or second round pick on it. So that would have been a surprise to me, even though I don't disagree. I think that scenario would be better than the current one, but I don't see a team that they are built on their pass rush, and that's a reason why they went and took Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald the last 2 years. I just think from a philosophy standpoint, it wasn't something that they would consider.
All right, we're going to wrap this up soon because we've been talking, a little over an hour here, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been awesome. We greatly appreciate having you. But I kind of want to end with this one big question as we go into this training camp. One thing that really sticks out to me about this is that it feels like the 53 is all but laid out already. There just doesn't seem to be that many. You talk about drama or what's going into camp. There's not a tremendous amount of positional battles. Probably a good thing because finally we've got a little depth. We know who's what, who's who and what's what. I mean, obviously a couple guys fighting maybe for first or second string stuff, but going into the last few years, even the last five or call it the decade, you look at top to bottom and you're like, there's 35, 40 guys who should be on this team. You wonder how many of them would have been starters or even second stringers on a lot of other teams. And that was always an issue. This time around, you're looking like we know it. The team is that much better. You're thinking we're 45, maybe even more deep, where it was just like, these guys are set in stone. There might be just a couple of guys fighting for something, and unless, obviously major injuries happen. My desk is made of wood, so I'm knocking on it right now. The expectation is like, we've got our 50-53 pretty set. I mean, unless I'm missing something. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think some of the, like, Denzel Mims was an interesting one that they kind of just answered the question by trading him away. I think, really competitions are going to be for that wide receiver 6 spot, which will probably be one of the UDFAs, I would imagine. But most of this, I agree that most of the depth is pretty obvious who's going to be here, who's not, unless they add, someone like maybe Dalvin Cook or Quan Alexander, two players that, Jet fans have talked about a lot over the last few months that the Jets have been linked to. If they add any of those guys, maybe that changes things a little bit. But I agree. I think, there's not a ton of competition for roster spots. At the center position, there's a battle for who will start. McGovern and Tippmann are going to be there and make the team. It's just who's going to be the starter. And, beyond that, I guess a linebacker 3, but I would think Jamie Sherwood has the inside track to that one. So the rest, I think, is going to be, fall into place a little bit here.
Yeah, which is what's so intriguing to me about why we are on Hard Knocks. And when you looked at the Lions, who were just catastrophic, but you had all these great young players, and then all of these interesting voices emerged out of that. And Hard Knocks was so enticing last year, and their head coach was so engaging in the way he spoke, and obviously kind of came across, and everybody expected him not to be the smartest guy, but he's absolutely brilliant. Again, at least from a vocational standpoint, like, as a head coach, hard job that still remains to be seen. But they were interesting, right? Burgeoning stars and all of this. And it's like, well, again, and that's kind of the point I'm trying to make. I'm glad we're on Hard Knocks. I think there'll be a lot of fun that comes out of it. Not worried about the distraction. But like I said, the 53 feels set. What are we really looking at here, Johnny? I mean, do you feel differently, or like, is this the first time in like a decade that it just feels good that the 53 is set?
No, I mean, it feels great. The fewer the question marks on the team, breed more confidence in going into week 1 opening night, September 11th, hosting the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah. All right. I think we said it and said it well. Well, before I turn on the music, Matt O'Leary, Just Jets podcast, and about a million other pieces of content that you put out there. You do it well. We appreciate what you do. We love you, man. Thank you so much for coming on. This is really cool. This is a lot of fun to have you. And you taught us a great deal today. Johnny, it's just good to see you as always. And I can't wait to fire this up in real time in the next couple of weeks more frequently. So any party shots? Anybody want to say a little something before we go?
Yeah, I just want to say to Matt, have fun at the Hall of Fame weekend. And I'm on record as saying that the Darrelle Revis-Joe Klecko feud will end with the Jets forcing Joe Klecko to say in his induction speech that Darrelle Revis is the best Jets defensive player of all time. If he says it, please think of me. If he doesn't say it, please think of me.
I love it. I love that one. Yes, thank you so much again, guys, for having me on. It was a ton of fun.
NYJ Ground Crew, this has been July 20th. Matt O'Leary, thanks for joining us. In a couple of weeks. Thanks again, Matt. We'll have you back. Thanks, man.